This happened when I was around 11 or 12 during the summer holidays. About me at the time. Male, about 5 feet tall, out of shape, and very shy. I was traveling with my parents in Europe, and we had been to Barcelona and Paris before, with our next destination being Tarragona, in Spain, where an amusement park called Port Aventura was located. We had scheduled to stay there, in one of the hotels, for 4 days, to visit the park, water park, and beach club. Now, the story I'm about to tell happened on the 3rd day, in the main park. It was getting late, and most of the areas of the park were closed, except for the Mediterranean area, as a show with fountains, lights, and fireworks was being held over the lake that night, as it was the week of the park's anniversary. I asked my parents if we could stay and watch the show, but they were much too tired after an entire day of running around the amusement park and needed to go to the information desk to make sure the things we had bought were properly sent to our hotel room. I begrudgingly obliged. As we were at the information center, I felt the need to go to the bathroom. I asked my mother if I could go and where the nearest one was. Turns out the closest one is at the edge of the Mediterranean area. My parents were busy at the info desk, and I have no siblings, so they just told me to go alone. I wish I had waited for them to be done so I could have gone with my dad, because what transpired was pretty traumatizing. So I navigated back to the Mediterranean area and to the bathrooms. The whole area was pretty busy, and lots of people were crowded by the edge of the lake to watch the show that was about to begin. I entered the bathroom and went on with my business at a urinal, until I noticed a man looking towards me. I normally don't like when people stare at me as I was shy, but this time, instead of embarrassed, I felt in danger. I glanced back at the man. He was about 6 feet tall, about mid-20s with a well-built physique, very short hair, almost shaved, Caucasian, wearing a gray hoodie, dark blue jeans, and black leather boots. It immediately struck me as the kind of person you wouldn't find in an amusement park. He was standing in front of the second urinal, as if using it, but I had the feeling he wasn't. I noticed him glancing over at me a few more times. I was done and eager to leave. I tried to pass behind him, and as I did, I noticed he tried to reach for me. I barely avoided his hand, and he grunted, while I made a whimpering noise. The bathroom was very crowded, so no one noticed it. As I neared the exit, he left his urinal. I left the restrooms and looked over at the lake. The show had started. There were images being displayed on the water of the fountains with a projector, and loud music was blasting on all the speakers. I tried to blend into the crowd, hoping to lose him. After about a minute of making my way through the cluster of people, I looked back. Not 10 meters behind me, there he was, following behind me through the same paths between the herd that I had cut through. He now had his hood up, covering his face, but I could feel him staring me down. I also noticed he was now wearing what I think were black fingerless gloves. Alarms were going off in my head, as my previous stance on this situation went from weird and creepy to dangerous. I turned and started to desperately get to an area I could run away in. After about 15 more seconds of squeezing through people, I reached the final stretch of the lakeside pathway. It was empty, too far away from the main show for anyone to be there, yet the speakers were still playing loudly here. Ahead was a maintenance side path, with the gate slightly ajar, and to the left was a turn leading back to the plaza with the Info Central building. I ran as fast as my asthmatic, out-of-shape self could towards the turn. I could hear this man running behind me, his boots getting louder and louder behind me. He was gaining on me. I started to panic and ran even faster than I thought I could, but he was still getting closer. I had reached the turn and changed directions so fast I leaned towards the ground and nearly slipped. I felt motion behind me, as if someone had taken a swing at me, and I could hear the man complain in a language I didn't recognize. My working theory is that it was Russian, but it was some Slavic dialect for sure. I kept running through the plaza directly to the information building, but I didn't hear the man running anymore. I turned around and saw him slip into the service gate at the end of the street. I ran inside the building and grabbed my mom's leg, stuttering and almost crying. But she was occupied with the lady at the counter, and though she saw me distressed, told me to go sit and wait and tell her when we left. I tried to protest, but she wouldn't listen and was paying keen attention to the lady. As I walked over to sit on one of the chairs, I looked out the door and scanned the plaza with my eyes. I didn't notice anything at first and almost looked away, but I saw something behind a direction sign posted next to a tree in the most remote and dark corner of the plaza. It was the man. It felt like we made eye contact. I turned away and sat in the chair furthest from the entrance. When we were leaving, I looked over in the same direction again, and he wasn't there anymore. I told my parents, but since I had a vivid imagination as a kid, they chalked it up to me being paranoid because I was alone, and that, even if it were real, there were way too many witnesses for someone to try and pull something of the sort. I wasn't happy to be called a liar about this, but considering how thick-skulled my parents can be, I didn't insist. I was just happy to have gone unscathed. I had tried to forget this encounter and was successful, but having run into other similar stories of near kidnappings, this resurfaced in my mind. As I was typing my story out, I realized how bad my situation was. The people around at the time were distracted by the show, so no one would have seen me get taken, and with the loud music no one would have heard me scream or struggle. And the fact that maintenance gate was open and I saw the man enter it means I almost ran right to where he wanted me. To think that I almost got kidnapped right next to a crowd of people, it boggles my mind. I've never gone alone anywhere in amusement parks since. When I was around 7 or 8, my family and I went on holiday to Gran Canaria, one of the Canary Islands, and during this holiday, we visited a rather large water park just outside of Puerto Rico, a region of Gran Canaria. Now this water park was big, like 4 sections with about 5 slides per area. So we were at the park having fun going down slides, but as I was young I mainly kept to the smaller kids slides and little wave pools, and sometimes venturing to the medium slides with my dad. But after a while my parents wanted to go on the biggest slides, so they left me and my younger brother in the care of my uncle, who was playing with my cousin in the kids' pool. I told my uncle that I was going to go to the medium slides, which were in viewing distance from the kids' pool, so he allowed it, and off I went. After a while, I thought to go back to the kids' pool where our loungers were to check up with my uncle and see if my parents had returned. But when I got back, nothing. I couldn't find anyone, and me being 7 at the time panicked a bit while going off in the direction of the big slides to find my parents. After a while of walking about, probably looking a little distressed, a kind of chubby but not overweight Englishman comes up to me, I'm Scottish, and asks if I'm okay. At first he seemed nice and offered to help me look for my mum, but me being brought up the way I was told him that he was a stranger and that I wasn't allowed to talk to him, and I walked off still on my search. A few minutes later, I see him again. In hindsight, he was probably following me, and he approaches me again and offers to take me for popcorn and a drink while I waited for my parents, to which I again say no, as my mum says I'm not allowed to go off with strangers. It was at this point when I see a lifeguard and walk over to him for help. I talk to the lifeguard saying that I need to find my parents and that we were over by the kids area when the man again appears and begins telling the lifeguard that he is a family friend and he would take me back to where we were. The lifeguard caught my "that's a lie" face that all young kids have and asks me if I know the man, to which I said no, and the lifeguard offers to walk me back to where my family was, which I obviously take up as I am now a bit scared of the man. The lifeguard takes me back to our sunbeds where my mum and dad were, and I could tell that my mum was upset, which I will elaborate on. Anyway, the lifeguard tells my parents what happened and that he'll look out for the guy so he doesn't bother us again. I don't remember much after just getting lost in the park and the now creepy English guy. So when I was old enough to understand, my mum told me why she was so upset when they didn't know where I was, other than the fact that their son was just gone. Earlier that year in Portugal, the very real disappearance of a girl really hit the UK in a big way, and many people were fearful of going abroad on holiday. It was about 5 years ago. I was only 15 and was on vacation with my parents and some of their friends. These friends of theirs also had a daughter, who was 4 years younger than me. One day we went to a water park nearby. Our parents thought I was responsible enough considering my age and asked me to look after their friend's daughter. Of course I agreed. So here we are running around the park trying different slides and queuing for various attractions. One of them was really fun, so we usually queued for that one. That's when things got ugly. So we were just talking about random stuff when 2 men in their 50s started laughing at what we were saying. We hadn't even noticed they were behind us in the queue, so we just turned to look at them and give them a smile. But then we returned to our conversations. Then, I heard them clearly saying some ugly things louder than they needed to so that we would hear them. They said things like, "Oh, those bikinis are really nice and maybe we should ask them to come with us." For a moment, with the corner of my eye, I saw one of them touching himself over his costume, and they were getting closer to our backs. Too close. So I immediately saw a lot of red flags and just thought that it was going to get worse and worse. My friend was clearly confused since she was also younger. Then one of the men tapped me on the shoulder and asked me if we were alone. I immediately replied, "No, my dad is here." So they scanned the area, wondering if my dad was actually there watching the whole thing. I saw the occasion and immediately ran away, taking my friend by the hand and just going as far away as possible from those guys. About 5 minutes passed. I was looking for my parents, but since I didn't have my phone with me, I couldn't find them. The place was very crowded, and it is also one of the biggest water parks in my region. We decided to go to another attraction and just ignore the whole thing. Well, what happened next left us speechless. While queuing for the attraction, the guys from before found us and said, "Why are you girls running? We just want to have some fun with you." And I managed to reply to them, "We don't want to, stay away," saying it louder so that the other people in the queue would hear me too. Some teenagers around my age then noticed something was off. Passerbys assumed they were our dads and pretended to know us, saying, "Hey, where have you been? Do you want to go on the slide with us?" And I also went along with them, trying to get those guys away from us. They apparently gave up and left the queue. I immediately thanked those guys and explained them the whole thing, and they said they would stick with us for the whole day in case those dudes were stalking us. At this point, the day is almost over, so we're heading to the changing rooms. Our newly made friends told us they would wait outside while we were changing. I was very grateful for their kindness because after that we never saw those old men ever again. Or so I thought. While I'm changing, I hear a man's voice coming from one of the stalls. It sounded like the one of those men. I'm thinking, it's not possible, I'm imagining it. But then I see him getting out of the stall with a child, who I assume was his daughter since she was calling him daddy. He was helping her get changed. For a second, then our eyes met. He was very surprised since he hadn't noticed me, and he immediately dashed out of the changing room. I'm petrified and scared of going out. My friend finished changing, and we then caught up with the other guys. We finally meet our parents and say goodbye to our saviors. To this day, I still think that if those boys hadn't helped us, we would have been constantly harassed and stalked by those dudes for the whole day, or maybe worse. This happened back when I was 11 or 12 years old. It was the beginning of summer, and I begged my mom to go to the water park in the next town. She couldn't drive, so she arranged for her friend to drop me off and pick me back up after. I was a decent swimmer and had been alone a couple of times before. My mom had given me the money for the admission and a little extra to get a drink and snack from the vending machines. I arrived and got changed, putting my bag in a locker and strapping the key around my ankle. I couldn't wait to get on the slides. There weren't too many people there as it was early evening, around 6 p.m., so I got on all the slides relatively quickly. My favorite was the River Rapid slide. On this slide, you would slide down small sections of the slide, splashing into small pools in between. You were supposed to use a rubber ring, but most kids, and some adults, didn't bother. No one ever worked on the slides anyway, so it was a bit of a free-for-all. I went down the River Rapid slide for the 4th or 5th time and splashed into the first pool. I mucked around for a bit here before wading towards the next section of the slide. I was completely alone on the slide, or so I thought. The next pool after this section of the slide was a dark, enclosed section. I like to sit in there sometimes and relax before finishing the ride. However, this time someone was already in there. A larger woman in her 30s or 40s lay on her stomach with her feet over the last section of the slide, her head peeking above the water. She was cackling loudly, a hysterical, guttural laugh. She looked me bolt in the eyes and pushed herself down the last section of slide, still laughing as it echoed off the slide walls. I was thoroughly freaked out and waited 5 minutes before sliding down so I didn't encounter her at the bottom. Presuming it was a random, freaky coincidence, I went straight back on the slide. Again, no one else was around. I rode the first section normally before apprehensively sliding the second section into the dark cave pool. And I heard it again. That creepy, genuine, hysterical laughter. There she was, the same woman from before, grinning and laughing while staring straight at me. She again flushed herself down the slide, leaving me alone. I decided I wasn't going to ride the River Rapid slide again that visit. She petrified me. I decided to go on the black hole next. It was a one-person slide. You are supposed to wait for the light to go green before sliding, so I figured I would be okay. I flung myself into the black abyss of the tube ride. However, I heard a second thud behind me. I turned around, and in the darkness, my worst fears were concerned. I saw the shadowy figure of an overweight middle-aged woman following me down the slide. And once again, she started laughing loudly and hard. The kind of laugh where you can barely pause for breath, as if you have seen the funniest show or meme you could imagine. I have never been more terrified in my life. I panicked, slamming my hands down on the floor of the slide and pushing in an attempt to make myself go faster. It worked a little, but she was never far behind, cackling away. When I reached the bottom, I threw myself out of the landing strip area, grazing my knee. I ran to the changing rooms, not looking back. I locked myself in a stall and removed the key from my ankle before running out to grab my stuff and went straight back in. I got changed and bolted from the building and called my mom. She sent her friend to pick me up right away.